In this episode, my co-host Stephen and I will be discussing the concept of freedom. What are we free to do? How much knowledge, awareness, power do we have over ourselves, our thoughts, our environment, and other people, and how much do other people influence and control us through law, parenting, force? I hope you enjoy the discussion. I want to share an idea with you, and I thought I could misuse the podcast to maybe develop this idea because I have a hard time. I have a hard time doing this on my own. I plan to write a book, and I've been wondering, and I'm still wondering, what is my passion? It's really difficult for me to just decide what am I passionate about. I don't know. I'm so focused on getting rid of negative things out of my life that I'm not sure about what positive thing I want there to be. And I realized one thing I'm definitely passionate about, and I've always been since being a teenager, is freedom. And so I intend to gather all my thoughts and literature and influences that have helped me with my journey to increasing my freedom. There are two kinds of freedom. I think that's usually a good place to start. And I don't know the established terms, but let's just call them freedom from something and freedom to do something.
Okay, yeah.
Right? I mean, using that should already make it clear what I'm getting at. One is like decreasing captivity and one is increasing capability or you know, powers, opportunity, stuff like that. Have you thought much about that topic?
Yeah, we could go on all day about freedom, I think, you and I. It's one of my main focuses, trying to understand what it means to be free. Because, like you say, free from something, free to do something. Again, like where to even begin? Those terminology, those two definitions themselves can branch out into 1,000 different concepts.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to be a bit focused and not waffly here. So my own experience with it is when it comes to people. So my own control of people and allowing people to be free to do what they want to do without the restraints. So I'm lucky enough to have a lot of people that rely on my opinion or just personality. And I always struggle with what point am I controlling and what point am I influencing, or what people are trying to control me or trying to influence me or allowing me to be free.
Yeah. That's definitely an aspect I've thought about.
Does that make sense?
Yep. Already as a teenager, I had issues with the idea that I'm being influenced all the time. Some people even believe they are a product of their environment, like entirely. And I can see where they're coming from. We have
self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, we have very little awareness of what causes us to think and behave and decide certain ways. And so self-awareness is a huge thing that I'm working on. Once you understand yourself, you understand other people better. And the chaos seems to dissipate a bit that is in the world.
And vice versa in a way. If you try to understand other people, you end up understanding yourself better as well.
Yeah, it's like not healthy to isolate yourself.
Yeah, like two sides of the same coin almost.
Right. Yeah, I believe that every decision we make has an effect on our surroundings. I am really opposed to this saying, I don't know if it comes from Immanuel Kant, about the sphere of your free will only goes as far until it hits the sphere of someone else. kind of picturing everyone in a bubble and how big is that bubble.
Yeah.
And that's just a superficial illustration of that. But
it's a way to visualize it, isn't it?
It is, but I don't even agree with the idea.
The notion.
Yeah. I think
it's free will only internal, because the church talks about it a lot, don't they? In obviously being raised as Mormons, or Church of Jesus Christ, or Latter-day Saints, we are told that like the only thing you can really choose is how you respond to a situation.
Yeah, that's very true.
Again, I don't know. Again, whether I believe that or not is by the by at the moment.
Yeah, I refuse to believe that in an absolute sense.
Yes,
I do want to change my surroundings. How idealistic people always say, I want to change the world. But that's very unspecific. So that means something is wrong. But, okay.
Yeah. I think it's the start to freedom. I think, actually, giving it some more thought just now, I think if we ourselves are able to, anything that happens to us, able to process and not necessarily have a too great a response to the positive, negative, again, I hate those terms, but to have an outcome without going through a process of thinking about it and feeling about it before we make a choice, then that, I think, is the key to the beginning of freedom, because then you are able to not have an instinctive reaction that then just causes chaos.
Yeah.
Slavery, because our emotions, we can be slaves to emotions. We can be a slave to logic as well, but for most human beings, something negative happens to them, they respond with a negative. Again, those terminology, just to keep it simple, like, if someone's angry towards you, most people will either be angry back or run away and cry and hide. How about you do neither? How about you just be at peace and go, okay, that's their choice to be angry. I choose to be at peace and to be free from a response that causes either harm to someone else or harm to myself.
Yeah. It sounded a lot like the fight or flight response that what you were describing.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm describing. Yeah, because that's what most people respond with.
And so that's instinctive, like you said. That's something you don't really control. So I wouldn't say it's you decide to respond that way. It's very automatic. And
it's the response to the response. Sorry, it's the response to that automatic response. You have to know what your response is and then choose what follows.
Right. And even if the first response is so automatic that you at least feel afraid, before you even become aware of your first response, what was I going to say? Like you never have full control over yourself. But even if all you can do is become aware of what just happened and then go home and work on it, that is
practice. It's an exercise.
Yeah, it's a long process. Yes. So I want to become more aware of all the subconscious programming, as some people call it, inside of me, and to understand why I react and behave certain ways. I've been listening to Bob Proctor a lot. His work is helping people with exactly that. And he is so professional that he doesn't even prepare all that much for his courses because he's been working on this for decades. He comes up with amazing examples all the time, like how a teenager does something stupid and then the parent asks them, why did you do that? Oh no. That's very common. But it doesn't go away. We're the same way. And then when someone asks, well, first of all, we no longer want to answer to anyone who asks, why did you do that? Because we feel entitled. And now we're the big ones who get to make all the mistakes without any accountability. But then when you do get asked, your brain gives you an excuse, a false reason, because your brain lies to you, wants things to stay the same way, and therefore gives you a false reason that seems plausible. And then when someone questions that again, then you get angry because you no longer have this pseudo reason.
Yeah, again, you feel justified. It's a common trait in humanity where, again, brain, body, whatever, mind comes up with, again, a reason for this behavior that justifies yourself of that behavior. And if someone contradicts that, then you're like, no.
Yeah, you must be wrong.
Yeah. Again, this whole wrong and right thing throws me. Because so few things.
Absolutely, yeah, that's a huge question that we have mentioned before.
Especially when it comes to freedom. Because again, like we have laws, we have that, we have things that can make you end up in jail. It's the complexity of our legal systems these days is so redundant because it just loopholes left, right, and center. And people that commit murders and stuff can get off free, and yet someone that, again, we talked about before, steals like some truth from digital information can spend the rest of their lives in prison. And there's a really warped concept of freedom from those higher up. So again, how do we as individuals, I guess, be free from that kind of thing and free to do?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know enough about history and law to know how the concept started. I was at the place in Iceland where the first European Parliament was supposed to have happened in 400 AD or something. Anyway, but I see what you're saying. Yeah, legality and, let's say, ethics or morality are diverging more and more, because legality, lawyers, courts, judges, is more and more about rich people staying rich.
Yeah.
Keeping their access.
Even things like crossing the road and wearing a seatbelt. Like, why are there laws revolved around something that should be so autonomous, and the responsibility should be on the individual?
Yeah, I like that question.
Again, it's the seatbelt thing because the driver is responsible, but technically it should be the individual that's responsible.
Right.
In my opinion.
Yeah, let's go into that question. So in America, the libertarians have a big interest in this question. And they say about drugs, for example, that you should be allowed to harm your own body because you're not harming anyone else. Yeah, I don't want to get too much into one example since they are complex, but if a parent is driving the car and their 6-year-old child doesn't want to wear a seatbelt, should the parent be allowed to force them? Or to say, I'm not driving you unless you put on the seatbelt, something like that. Not something extreme like I'm going to kill you unless you wear a seatbelt. But should the parent have some authority? We've talked about parenting before, and the last thing that I remember from that is parents are big children, and they don't always know what's best for other people either.
Yeah, it gets more complex when it's to do with children. Like if it's adults, then it's less complex, because with children, you have the idea of accountability, an age of accountability, and how much they understand. Because a child at 6 does not understand really what death really is and what could happen if they splatter against the seat, whereas an adult does. And so the adult should be, if an adult's in the back seat and they don't wear a seatbelt, I think in this country, it's the driver that's responsible.
I think so.
And it's too. And it's like, why that person in the back chose not to wear? Again, we go on all day, blah blah. It's more complex than that, but it's just a fascinating concept about freedom, where even these little things, because we always think about big things again, like stealing, murder, that kind of stuff. But actually, when it comes to simple things, how much freedom do we have?
But another thing you reminded me of is that government often sees adult citizens as children. So one reason that some people put forth for us having a law is that we don't know what's good for ourselves. And therefore we need someone to protect us from our own mistakes, which is a lot like a parent forcing a child to do what's right for them. And so does that make sense? Because a government is made up of people as well. It is not some overarching instance. I mean, they try to consult with experts, scientists or whatever, and that can be a good idea, but I don't think that's good enough. I don't think it works the way it ideally does in people's minds. And so, yeah, lately I've also been questioning government and law a lot. Maybe for 1 year now, I've been studying a lot on the topic of anarchy and anarchism.
Yes, yeah. No, I think I have a lot of my roots in what would be classed as anarchy, anarchism, whatever the word is.
Yeah, I'm not sure if there is a big difference, but I like to use both words because the word anarchy often gets used in a totally different way than I mean it. So yes. I would say it has two meanings. One is what the mainstream news uses to when they want to put down the concept of anarchy. They say, oh, it's when people riot and they just lose control over themselves and just
which
chaos
is not
everywhere.
What it means at all.
Yeah. One way that anarchists that I follow online differentiate it is anarchy is not the absence of rules, but the absence of rulers.
Yeah, it's more of an open system than a closed system.
Yeah.
Like governments are very closed systems, whereas anarchy should be very open to multiple options that are available.
Yeah, I think it would help. I think it would be one step in the right direction if people would govern themselves more locally. So if I had a personal connection with the person who is over me, in charge of something, and so that I know that I gave this person whom I personally trust the right to decide about this, some local police force, for example, or just someone who's in charge of our internet or something like that.
Yeah.
And then I would be a lot more comfortable with them making decisions over me. And I would have to willingly give them authority. I would have to pass my right, my freedom for something onto someone else. And that isn't always a bad thing. That can be a good thing because we're too busy to take care of all of our needs.
Yeah. It's delegating freedom and choice is a perfectly acceptable thing when it comes to this kind of stuff, because we can't do everything ourselves, as you say. But it reminds me, I think we talked about it last time or in a previous podcast, I had a friend who very articulately broke down the difference between like now and like 200 years ago in terms of the country's representation, and how you'd have the 400 whatever people in parliament covering X amount of people, and that's now like 10 times as many people they're representing. Those individuals are representing so many more people, and therefore can't get to know the constituents and what they actually want and all that kind of stuff, which is bizarre that it's not adapted, that the system hasn't adapted with the population growth.
Yeah, it's going in the wrong direction. There should be more localization. So globalism or globalization is one way that this movement has been going on for decades. I first of all think of economy when I hear the word globalization, so that we have manufacturing in China and then selling the products for a lot more than the manufacturing cost in the West.
Cheap labor, high profit.
Yeah, so that's not a great thing, and we lose a lot of the manufacturing jobs here in the West. But the more frightening thing, I think, is the centralization of power that comes with that movement. And I think, well, what I hear from British friends, the reason that they like Brexit is that they felt less of a connection to the European Parliament than to the British one. They felt they could not trust the European Parliament to represent them as much as the British one does. Now, I don't think that the British Parliament represents the British people any more than the European one does, but I get the sentiment, because this is putting more power in less hands.
Yeah.
And I was happy to hear you mention last time that we chatted offline that you're familiar with the New World Order.
Yes. Yep.
So what does that mean for you? I'm not so familiar with it.
Okay. Well, my own understanding is that for even since the dawn of time, or at some period in our history, there has been a group of people who have understood the dynamics of control and population action and reaction enough to be working towards the ultimate control of humanity, where they have all the power, this new world order, or this entity of people, and they currently influence, or they have been influencing and try to influence everything in a way that will lead to, again, them having centralized power, and humanity basically be slaves, producing, consuming, so that, again, whether it's money or whatever, goes to these people, and the power, ultimately power and influence. There's, I don't know if you've ever seen, have you seen Mr. Robot, TV show Mr. Robot?
A few episodes, yeah.
Yeah, like they go really into it quite a lot, into the third, fourth, well, into each season. And it's very fascinating what they cover, and how they cover it all. And again, I don't know if I believe or not. Like, it makes sense there would be. Like, if you look at the way the world is going and globalization and all the things that are happening, it would make sense that there is some situation, entity, whatever, influencing us to slowly give up our freedoms one by one over time. Like V for Vendetta, the film, is another prime example that covers it. The Matrix, they all cover it.
Yeah.
And the irony is that these things probably actually have been created through the dynamic of the New World Order to appease those of us that want the change. So we feel we know how to make the change, but we don't make the change. So like, oh, yeah, V for Vendetta and Matrix, they all talk about, rebelling against the system, where all these different things are probably actually in place, created to subdue us, because it vents that emotion. If we didn't get that outlet of seeing those things, it would probably build up more and more and more to actually try to make a change more. Again, just these aren't necessarily my direct beliefs, they're just philosophies, that ideas that come into my head when I think about this type of thing. What about you? What about your views?
It makes sense, because they're not independent films, right? They had to go through Hollywood to create those films, and therefore there is some control over that. Yeah. I mean, I've watched a lot of material on the topic. I mean, I said I'm not familiar with the New World Order because I don't know what is part of it and what isn't. It is a term that gets thrown around, but James Corbett is really good at documenting trends that he notices, and we are like a frog in a boiling pot, right? That the change is so minute, and we get appeased, like you said, that we are distracted enough to not do anything about it. But sometimes people are just shocked with a huge thing that they never expected was happening in the background, and then it's their choice. It's the blue or red pill decision. Do you want to find out more about it, or do you reject what you heard? And
safety versus struggle.
Yeah. So, and this is something that everyone does. I never want to say that I'm immune to this.
I do all the time. It's a natural reaction to pick the easy, safe path.
Yeah. Denial, that's the word I was looking for. So when your brain gets confronted with something outlandish, that just doesn't fit your model of the world, then you deny it. And that's an automatic reaction, like we said earlier. And it might take some time to accommodate the new information rather than suppressing it and finding arguments against it. There's a bubble chamber for everything. and only subscribing to certain YouTube channels and people on Facebook that confirm your bias, therefore called confirmation bias. And then it's up to you personally whether you will open yourself and study on that topic or just reject it. And it's really difficult because we're in an information age and we are flooded with information. You can find convincing arguments for both sides on every topic.
Yep.
Today I watched a documentary called Plandemic. Have you heard of that?
No.
I actually
that's a good title. I like that title. Pandemic. That's
yeah. I wanted to see, is there any really high quality material on the theory that the pandemic is man-made, or at least in part. Like, does it have a certain agenda? And so I had heard the word, and then I entered it into YouTube, and I got lots of counter videos saying why the Plandemic documentary is false and why it's fake and wrong science. And so I thought, okay, I want to watch this documentary. And it wasn't easy to find. I actually only found part 2. I couldn't find part 1 on YouTube. I had to go to BitChute to find part 1. But I thought the video was really well made. Obviously, it uses effects to make things more emotional, more dramatic.
Oh yeah.
But I try to stay aware of that and think it is a good thing, because we don't just live on an intellectual level. Some people are just more approachable on an emotional level, or symbolic, colors, stuff like that, stories, first person reports. And then when I finished watching it, I also watched some counter videos. So that was really interesting. And I like that I'm always of the opinion that it's good for there to be more information than less, as in the way to counter false information is to publish more good information rather than suppressing it.
I am brought into my head a few things we've just been saying. It might be a little bit of a tangent here, but I'll try and bring it back around. And again, that's to do with how can we make viable choices? So you talk about good information, bad information about a scenario. My biggest problem is that I often don't make a choice about an opinion on things. So I say, well, that's plausible. There's information there that say that. I accept that that's possible. Or I say, it doesn't seem possible, but it could be possible.
Yeah.
And I don't actually give myself I actually believe this, I have this opinion, because I find it very difficult to do that, because I don't feel like I have enough data and enough information to say I have an opinion on certain things, like a lot of things.
That's being super honest with yourself.
Yeah. And I often have, again, tangent here, but issues with free will, because how much of our choices are actually based on all the data, enough information to make them a choice, to make them a viable choice. So my example is, I can go out today and actually, I'm trying to think of a better example. I can't think of one. If I want to make a choice and I have all this select data in front of me that I'm using to make this choice, just subconsciously or consciously, just in my brain, in my heart, whatever. And then something left field that I didn't think of or feel of comes and completely throws my choice into chaos. There was no way that Stephen, as a mortal being that's not able to see past, present, and future in a way that makes sense, could have known that was going to happen. So how viable is my choice that I've made when that situation can happen? Marriage is a prime example. Like, if you marry someone, then like, how do you know if they're going to cheat or not? Like, how do you know that? You expect that they don't. You make that choice, and you can go through a marriage for ages, and then your partner cheat on you, or you potentially get tempted to cheat. You might have never thought that would happen. We're all human. Things happen, and you look back and you go, oh, what happens if, what if I had done this? What if I had done that? What happens if I had done that? You go back in the past, you try and change the past. because actually at various points you didn't have all the information to know and prepare yourself for either a temptation yourself or for your partner making that choice. So how much of your choice is actually like viable? You just have to make the choice and just roll with it in life. That's kind of the point I'm making here, I guess, is that quite often I don't actually think of too much of consequences of choice, because at the end of the day, government could get involved in scenarios, people get involved in scenarios. I may do something that my mental health may drop and completely throw things into chaos. My physical health may drop, throw things into chaos. And then usually in a scenario, I wouldn't make that choice, but because at that point in time, there are other factors involved, boom, changes everything. And so when it comes to what you're saying about information, just to loop it back around, is that, how do we know we have viable information and good or bad information enough to choose?
Yeah.
So I just choose. I just make the choice to get on with it.
I think that's healthy and necessary to get anywhere. I remember being stuck for a while several years ago with making decisions at all, because I wanted to make correct decisions, and I realized that I can't because of the missing information, like you said, or other limitations. And so I tried to make no choices, and it was impossible. And so I felt like I'm being forced to make choices, to make mistakes. And I still feel that way, but it doesn't hurt me as much anymore.
You learn to accept it's okay. Like you learn to love the game, not the game, because that's the wrong word, but the adventure of it. The adventure of just doing something and seeing what happens. Like, at least I do anyway.
I'm not there yet.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, okay.
But I am making progress by being okay with the limited freedom that I realize I have due to a lack of information and the possibility of being certain that I'm making a right choice. But I read something that helped me with that, and that is more important is your intention when you're making a choice.
Yes.
And that's also Christian ideal. We believe that God judges us by our intention, not by our deeds.
Yeah.
Often when we judge what someone else is doing, we don't know their intention, and we judge them by the outcome of their intention and decision, which we would never want other people to do to us.
Yeah.
And we want to be judged by our intention, not the results of our actions.
And again, we don't know what's led them to that point to make that choice. We don't know why they're making that choice. You say the intention, and we may assume the outcome or see an outcome short term, but longer term outcome they may have foreseen something that we haven't, and therefore, how do we know? And it's the same with us. There's so many times where I make choices and people are like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, I explain it to them, and they're just like, "Oh, I get that. I see where you're blah 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 blah," because I've necessarily maybe just quickly thought further ahead or whatever. And vice versa. People do it to me all the time. I'm like, "Are you sure that's the right course of action?" And they're like, "Oh, blah blah blah." And I'm like, that information I didn't have in my head. Fair enough. You make it. I always be like, "Yeah, okay, cool." I say to them, I was just making sure all things were understood by myself and you, because that's happened a lot recently for me. I've got a new friend that come into my life, and they are going for a very, I use the term metamorphosis stage, where they're just changing a lot because they're coming out of one scenario in their lives, moving towards whatever comes next. And it's a scary but very developmental process, but emotionally and mentally. And again, I'm trying not to control them because that's the last thing I want, but I'm trying to give that wisdom or influence to a degree so they have that on top of what they themselves have. Because they themselves have, they're freaking smart and super aware.
But it's more of an invitation, right? You don't say you should be doing this, or if you want your life to improve, you have to do this, because you never know for sure what's the right thing for them. You can just tell them your personal experience, and obviously it's only possible to tell them anything because they give you the trust. They basically give you permission to make recommendations.
Yeah, it's a very special connection. I think we have that one where we are able to just share each other's opinions on things with understanding that we're both just trying to help each other become more aware of scenarios to equal, again, happiness. Because, again, like, ultimately, the whole Who Am I podcast, I think that the Who Am I equals happiness, because if we find out who you are and what you understand about the world, you'll learn to be happy with whatever scenario happens.
To navigate better through this life. Yeah, there are times when you say something that I think is wrong, and then I guess the first thought that pops into my mind is, what information is he missing that I have?
And then you give it to me and it helps me. Like, this is, again.
But at the same time, I mean, since it's you, it's easier to do this. With anybody, it's not easy for me. With you, I can also quickly think, what information does he have that I don't have? Which is a lot harder, than trying to convince someone else of your perspective. And when you said that it's always good to keep a window open for the possibility that you've been misinformed, or that you've just gone down a path that could turn out to be wrong. You reminded me of this quote by F. Scott Fitzgerald: "An artist is someone who can hold two opposing viewpoints and still remain fully functional."
Let me know how that goes, because I can hold two opposing thoughts or whatever it was you said, but I don't know if I'm fully functional.
Yeah, well, to a lot of people, it's cognitive dissonance when they're confronted with two things that sound plausible and convincing, and they're incompatible with each other.
Yeah.
Some people cannot handle that and just want to leave the situation.
Well, it's conflict, isn't it? Internal conflict.
Yeah.
Where it doesn't need to be. Like we talked about earlier, positives, negatives. It doesn't need to be a thing in those terms. It can just be. It can just exist.
Yeah, I want there to be harmony in everything, at least in my mind.
Of course, yeah.
But it doesn't seem to work that way. And so it's something I try not to stress about anymore.
Yeah.
And since I'm a scientist and like to think about things logically and intellectually, there was a time when I was thinking about researching, or changing my research focus and figuring out a mathematical language that does allow for things to be in harmony, that takes subjectivity into account. For example, that nobody's model of reality is complete, and that explains how opposing viewpoints can exist. But
because it's a constantly evolving universe. The universe is constantly evolving, in its own way.
The only constant is change.
Yeah.
And also, it's not even missing information in people's heads that bring about disharmony. It's the nature of the universe itself. So when I went down this rabbit hole for a while, I learned about quantum theory and learned that a state of a system, of a physical system, is uncertain not only from the perspective of someone. So it's not just that their mental model of the system is incomplete, or in several states at the same time, how some people like to call it. It is ontologically, even objectively independent of how other people think about it in several states at the same time, or in an uncertain state. So there's cognitive uncertainty, and then there's ontological uncertainty, and that is really hard to wrap your head around. So I think that kind of helped me to get off that path and not try to find a way to make sense of disharmony.
I think that's it. Like it doesn't make sense, and it's okay that it doesn't make sense. Like that's what I've come to learn. Like, again, trying to make sense of things, but by realizing that we can't make sense of it, it then makes sense.
Yeah.
Like it's once you accept that process, it's very freeing, very liberating, because you learn to have a broader perspective, and you become more one with just your surroundings, like the universe. In my opinion, like that's what I felt anyway, where I just felt, again, a harmony with disharmony. Like it's just part of the process.
I think I have trouble letting go and just allowing things to be the way they are without me understanding. And I imagine that's because I feel afraid that something will happen, and therefore I need to understand everything so that I can predict the future.
Yeah. It's also our own desire to control. Like we have internally, we should be allowed to control our own circumstances. That's the freedom that we want.
Yeah, we do want that.
And we and some of us want it more than others. Actually, some people don't want it. Some people want to be led. Some people want to just follow, and it made easy for them. Whereas others, like ourselves, we actually do want the hard path. We want to. I mean, some days we don't because it's exhausting, but inherently, our nature is to want to have freedom to control our own destiny, and often, as you use the term "let it go," is what we need to do. We need to learn to let go of that control. It's very, very Buddhist mentality, very Eastern European, Eastern Asia and stuff, Oriental scenario, where they teach that. Like I was talking to a friend about the artwork that a lot of, I guess, the Shaolin monks or some aspect of Buddhism and all that tend to do, where they spend a week or longer making these like sand pictures, like mandalas, whatever they're called, and they spend all this time, all day, just
just not the South African president.
Not the South African president. No, I always get those like confused.
It only has A's.
Then you've got Mandalorians, and that just gets it all confusing. Good old Star Wars. And they make this beautiful tapestry of just like sand, different colored sand, and it's so intricate and beautiful. And then they literally just no pictures are taken, nothing's taken. They just wipe it clean. So you go through that massive creative process, all that energy and effort, and then you accept that it's okay to just let it all go. You've done the creation process, and now it no longer exists, but it existed, and it exists within you. There's again loads of just different metaphors, whatever. But she was like, "What? They just get rid of it?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's beautiful." She's like, "No." I'm like, "Okay, we're not there yet." But like, so that's always been something that's hit home with me, where like that thing, and then you've got in like the film Fight Club. There's a lot of scenes where it talks about letting it go. Just let it go. Like, stop trying to control everything. Sometimes you just have to just let it go. And once you do, again, for me personally, it's just like it has felt freeing. I get myself into a little trouble sometimes because I'm not being as conscious of consequences probably maybe I should still be, but I feel there's a closer balance to just acceptance of
I like the thing with the mandalas too, because some things are just ephemeral, or they don't have any lasting value if you think about it hard enough, and it's more about the actual experience and what you take with you inside of you.
And that's life.
That's a helpful thought. I once gave a talk on responsibility and started out by saying some people take too much responsibility and some take too little, and I'm the former type. It's because I often feel responsible for too many things. So, for example, the behavior and decisions of other people, because a part of me thinks falsely, for the most part, that I could have prevented that if only I had gotten that person's trust and taught them how to make a better decision. And I don't know if that's just my brain talking unrealistic.
No, it makes sense. I've been there so many, and I still am. Again, it's not like I've suddenly figured this all out. It's part of the ongoing process. The metaphor I use now is just holding people's hands. Like literally, I used to try and take on board more wisdom, because again, I'm always just trying to be a sponge, but also give more and help people more. But now I've kind of realized that you can't. Like, you just can't. It's not part of the process. You literally have to just be beside them or behind them or whatever, or in front of them, to just guide or catch or hold their hand. Because if you try to influence too much, like, they'll not listen, and they'll actually probably hate you for it, and repel against what they appear to be control.
Yeah.
Or what they assume to be control.
So the opposite, when someone takes too little responsibility, is laissez-faire. You just believe that everything that will happen is supposed to happen. That's one way that people put it, and I think it's an excuse. It just doesn't feel right to me.
Yeah.
Like they feel like I can't control everything, therefore I shouldn't try to control anything.
Yeah.
And they don't take responsibility for themselves. They don't try to improve themselves.
Yeah.
They maybe sometimes.
But maybe they find the way they are. I mean, this is again, the conflict is hilarious. The constant contradictions.
It doesn't go well with what I'm trying to do, but I can learn something from these people as well, because sometimes someone might appear very irresponsible to me because they just work a very different way. So people who are highly intuitive don't use their rational mind as much as I do. They just trust their inner mind. Not sure how to describe it because it's not so natural for me, but I'm trying to work on it. They just ask their inner mind what is the right thing to do, and they get an answer, and they go with it. They don't know how that answer came about. They don't know what axioms the calculus was based on to arrive at that conclusion. It just happens entirely subconsciously. And I think, whoa, that's so irresponsible. I would have to know at least a little bit about the process of arriving at that conclusion in order to have any trust in it. But that's just something that I am working on. It is kind of the opposite of my of the strength that I started out with. Obviously, the ideal is the best of both worlds.
Bingo. That's what I was going to go on to just say a little bit about. Is how it's not necessarily so in my head I was thinking about things like, okay, well maybe it's a 10% proactivity and 90% laissez-faire, or maybe it's the other way around. And then I'm like, well, no, it's at any given point it can be any percentage ratio. So sometimes you have to be 100% proactive in a situation. Other times you have to be 100% laissez-faire. It just depends on the scenario, and that's, I think, I've talked about it quite a number of times. Again, the specifics of a scenario, and that's the hard part. That's the next level. That's like the highest level, pretty much, that we're all kind of aiming. Well, I personally am aiming for. But at any given time, for an optimal response, for me, and maybe for others, but we've got to love ourselves and look after ourselves first, to be able to know which one is most optimum.
Yeah. I haven't thought about this too much, but I just realized that the bigger the decision is, the more types of decision making I use. So big life decisions about relationships, jobs, moving, I will want to feel certain about them, and then I will use my rational decision making. How do I feel about it? What emotions? I will go more spiritual and try to feel good about the decision in my spirit, and I want those to align before I make a big decision. And then small decisions where it doesn't matter so much if I make a wrong decision or not, I'll be faster. Like I'll make them more instinctively, or depending on what area they're in. If they're job related, then usually rationally.
Yeah. Well, the consequence isn't as great, as you say.
Yeah.
Like the consequence itself, you can do it instinctively because shrug shoulders if I pick the chocolate bar that I don't actually want necessarily, but just pick it and then get home and be like, oh, it wasn't actually what I wanted. I wanted the other chocolate bar. Doesn't matter. You still got a chocolate bar. But yet, a big choice, you just, like if you get the wrong job, well, again, wrong. Who says it's the wrong job? Like, how do we know, again, what's best for us? Sometimes just going ahead and doing and seeing what happens.
Wow, yeah, you just opened several big topics that we could get into another time, like choice or the illusion of choice, and right and wrong, and what else did you say? how subjective something right or wrong is. So sometimes is it right or wrong for me? And I believe that there are also more objective right and wrongs. So because some things most people will just agree on are wrong, like murder.
Yeah.
And then how is that possible? Because how is it possible that we agree on something at all in this world? But I don't know why. Anyway, it's a question for now.
Yeah, I think we can clip that and just think about it over the next little while.
Well, when I edit this, I will make some notes for the future.
That sounds good.
And also for my book. Like I said, this is one of the purposes for these coming episodes will be to help me gather material for a book on freedom. I'm thinking about calling it Freedom Creators or something, just to put the emphasis on our personal responsibility to create freedom.
Boom. Yeah, I like that. In fact, I love that. That's brilliant. That's I'm buzzed about this. I'm excited.
And maybe you can help me about writing in general. Have you only written fiction so far?
I've written a lot of. I've got various non-fiction stuff written down. I have different topics that
But not published, right?
Yeah, not published. Just written essays about or quotes and stuff on different topics that intrigue me.
Mm-hmm. You just reminded me of doing this in portions. Might be another good strategy, blogging about it first, and then compiling it into a book. I'll think about that, since our website doesn't have to be only for podcasts.
Yeah, that's probably a good way. Because again, the whole how do you eat an elephant a little bite at a time, blogging and writing about it, just little subtopics, will, before you know it, you'll have half of what you want already done. Because if I went back over all the blog stuff that I've written over the last 10 years, the word count must be quite substantial. So
didn't you write a blog about writing?
Yeah, so still ongoing. So yeah, like every so often, I like twice a year put up a post about what's going on, but from day one, it was much more like this is what I'm learning, this is what I'm going through sort of blog. So that can be what you do, is you just as you week by week, month by month, go through different thoughts about freedom and your own experiences. Because again, part of the book could be personal experience, part of it can be just like quotes, part of it can be other people's experiences, part of it can be just like academic. Again, all these different options that you have. Again, it's your choice at all. But how you want to structure it.
Yeah, I'm also thinking about collecting inspirational material. So since I am spending more time watching what other people say on this topic, I could at least
create a file,
their YouTube videos or something.
Yeah, create a file and dump everything that you looked at into a file, so you have it there and can extract from it.
And then I'm really not good at storytelling, even though everyone experiences things that could be told in a story. It's really hard for me to think of my experiences that way. So maybe I'll need help with that, and maybe I'll just try to find other people's stories that fit with the topic.
Yeah, just examples.
I don't know.
It's a good start. You've got a good start, and you've got an idea. So this is how it all starts, really. But again, I love that Freedom Creators. So really good, something like that. Because again, personal responsibility. Because again, people need to wake up. People need to wake up, and people are waking up. They're waking up to as the decades go by. There's again the polarization. Some people are going deeper and deeper into sleep because they're just scared and don't want to get involved, and again denial. Then other people are getting more and more woken up to the fact that there's something wrong about our current society and state of the system.
Yeah, I want to contribute to that as well.
Yeah.
But isn't it interesting to see that when we look for examples of people who have woken up, who have made progress, we can tell that I want to be more like him, because he seems more relaxed. He seems to have a
free.
lot of purpose in his life. What is he doing? And people who I look up to in that way have done a lot of the same things. So this whole notion that whatever you do has to be right for you, and there are a million different ways of doing the right thing, doesn't seem to jive with that. You know, there seems to be a common path that people take in order to become more free and
well, the path is semi-similar, but the end result's the same. Potentially, but the path in terms of specifics are different, but there are points of, again, just opinion, I'm saying it as if it's a fact, but opinion, that revolve around the same scenario, same ideology, same, because the circumstances are different.
Yeah.
But some of them aren't. Again, it blends, it mixes together. Some aren't. Again, potential poverty. Points. Yeah, potential poverty, struggle of some kind, mental health struggle of some kind, potentially physical struggle of some kind, a loss, a grievance, sparks the fire to then want change. And then they go through a process of how do I make that change? And then they figure out, again, even though they may not necessarily agree with it, there's a financial thing involved. So they go down that line, they make their money through housing or through land or oil or science or computing, whatever that fits their boat, or writing, to be free, to get their income come in. Once you get that income, you could then, in this system that we live in, have more freedom to affect the world around us.